Well, welcome to Victorious Friday. I'm so excited today. I have a very special guest with me today. He's a good friend. He's a trailblazer for truth. He's in relationship. And this is Josh McDowell. He's been at the forefront of cultural change and for many, many years. He's a groundbreaking ministry, and he has a groundbreaking ministry for over 5 decades.
It sounds like you're introducing. It sounds like you're introducing yourself, a groundbreaker, a trailblazer.
No, this is you, Josh. I know you. I know you try to be humble. You don't want to read all this stuff, but I'm just going to give them a little bit about you, and then I got to get you in here because I know you hate to talk about yourself. But when
I don't mind.
When I think about Josh, I think I have many of his books. I'm sure you do as well, and I just think of your life, Josh, and I see faith at work. Josh, welcome to the show, my friend. Victorious Friday.
Well, this is like dying and going to heaven on a Friday.
Well, we're not yet. We're going to still use you for a little while. It'll still be a blessing. Well, my friend, how's it going? What have you been just doing these days with all this COVID stuff that's happening? What's happening in your life lately?
I've been locked in just about 4 months since March 7th. Yeah. And it's been marvelous. I go to bed at night and say, where did the day go? I've been literally for 130, 140 days, 24/7, I work 12, 14 hours a day.
Wow.
Writing, researching, communicating with people, creating projects. And I love it. Plus, 4 months with my wife. I'm usually lucky to have 4 days at home with my wife. Last year, I traveled 330 days.
330 days. Wow.
Yeah. And that's why God brought the virus around. He had to stop the whole world just to get me to slow down.
Yeah, to slow you down a little bit. What were some of the places you visited last year?
Oh, my gosh. All over the world.
Yeah.
I can't even think. I mean, that's been so far back. I have a photographic mind, but no film.
Yeah. Josh, one of the things I'm interested in, I mean, you've seen so much, not only pandemics, but you've seen trends in what I would call biblical worldview and what's happening in our society. How would you sum things up right now from your perspective? What's happening, especially in the family? Any thoughts there?
I would say one, just not only the family, but with the culture, the economy, with the church. I would use the word exciting potential. Exciting potential.
Awesome.
What is happening? The virus, the COVID, the isolation, the entire world has been quarantined in their homes. I mean, I've talked to Tibet, to Inner Mongolia, Outer Mongolia, everywhere. I've been 40-some countries. I've done hour interviews with them. And they're all isolated in their homes. But everybody is saying, oh, loneliness, depression, pornography, mental illness problems. It's caused all these. No, it hasn't. It has not caused any of those. You go back 5 months ago before the virus, the number one epidemic in the world was pornography. Number 2, loneliness. Number 3, depression. And right with 2 and 3 was mental illness problems. Gen Z, this is 5 months ago, Gen Z, in one generation from millennials, rated 300% higher on the mental illness scale than the millennial. In 1 year, went up 300%. Well, then when the virus came along and we got quarantined, it didn't create these things. It magnified them. It intensified them. Because if you watch pornography, and more than probably 70% of all men do, 52% of all evangelical pastors are addicted to pornography.
Wow.
If you watch pornography, you go into isolation quarantine, pornography will feed you into loneliness. If you read pornography, you become depressed. And if you read pornography, you're going to develop mental illness problems. But if you go into this, go down and you're lonely, that will lead to depression, which will lead to mental illness problems, which will lead to pornography. If you're depressed, it'll lead to loneliness, it'll lead to pornography. It's a vicious cycle.
It's a cycle, isn't it?
When we come out of this, the church is going to have not an unprecedented, but a historical opportunity to
Mhm.
make a difference with
Mhm.
pornography, with loneliness, and depression. And the thing that you brought up that I'm so concerned about is the family.
Mhm.
Is the family. Um, so much of us in the family, we're communicating with our thumbs, not with our tongues. And in most families, we might be connecting, but we're not relating.
Yes.
And you look at the racial thing going on now.
Mhm.
You know, everybody says, well, it's police brutality. Well, you can do away with all the police, everything, and it'll be worse.
Yeah.
Racism will be, well, you can do all any racist cop there is, you can do away with them. You'll still have racism.
Yeah.
You can give everybody an economic opportunity. I believe in diversity and equality. Equality means everyone has the same opportunity.
Mhm.
So a guy is 6 foot and can look over a fence at a baseball game, then somebody is 5'4" or 5'2", both of them can get a ladder. They can look over, have the equal opportunity to look over the fence at the ball game.
Mhm.
And you could change all of this. You could have all the laws, political, economic, social changes. You could do away with the police. You'll still have racism. Why? There's one common factor in the entire world. One, I've been to 139 countries, spoken to over 47 million people, interacted with people all over the world. I have never met a person that's not a racist. Never. Not one single
Wow.
person that is not a racist.
Mhm.
And there's one common denominator to all racial problems: people. Do you get it? It's not the police. It's not this. It's not. It's people.
Yeah.
And here's the people that will become the greatest racists: those who are raised in fatherless homes,
Mm.
those who are raised without a close relationship with daddy.
Mm.
I just finished a 24-page documented paper on the consequences in a person's life, especially when they become an
Yeah.
adult, when they have not had a father that relates in the home. The father can be there, but so many of them don't relate. He might as well not be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you can do all this you want with the police and everything else with racism, but I'll tell you this:
Mhm.
if you do not put the family back together,
Mm.
you're spinning your wheels on
Mhm.
ice.
Yeah.
And here, everyone is talking about the police. Everyone's talking about this, that. No one's talking about the family except you. You're the first person that's brought it up to me in 4 months.
Wow.
That's why I like Victorious Friday
Well, I
with
tell you,
Terence.
Josh,
With Terence.
I'm so excited to have you on. At Victoria's Friday, it was birthed out of
I thought
just.
first it was Victoria's Secret with Terence, and then I read it careful. Oh, it's Victorious
Well, yeah, my wife
Friday
might have
with
had something to
Terence.
say about that. Oh
So
man,
that's where you take your wife to shop, right? Victoria's Secret.
exactly
Go ahead.
right, right. Well, we're seeing this pandemic. I think we've been seeing this pandemic in the family for quite some time. I've been looking at. There's really been a pandemic. I call it a tide that's going against, and you nailed it. One, our authority in the home has just been desecrated. I mean, dads are not there, and even if they're there, like you say, they're not connecting. And I believe there's never a time in a child's life that they don't crave the love of the father. For some reason, the mother's love, they get that, but they crave the love of the father. And if it's not there, they start to search other avenues for that acceptance, if you will. What's your thoughts on
I
that?
put it. I put it this way. I had a young lady when I launched the Why Wait campaign,
Mm.
which went global on sexual purity.
Mhm.
And this one young lady, her name was Stephanie, I think, wrote me a letter. And she said how she'd been involved sexually, everything. And she nailed it for most young people. She said, my whole life I've been searching for my daddy's love.
Yeah.
I've been searching for my daddy's love. And there's so many men and women all over the world that so many of the problems in their lives, the behavior they're doing, is that they're searching for their daddy's
Yeah.
love.
Yeah.
And I put it this way: there is no second daddy. There's only one daddy's love. Now, thank God for step parents. Thank God that, especially if they really relate to the child. But that's a step parent's love. It's not a daddy's love.
Yeah.
And the only place a child can get it, which is their greatest need in life, is from their daddy. But thank God for step parents.
Yeah.
For so many of them are making a difference in a child's life.
Yeah.
But even a step parent needs to realize, I'm not their daddy.
Yeah, I agree.
Father.
Josh, let me kind of turn it a little bit on a different subject. I want to get your thoughts on. Yeah, Victoria's
we finished with family already?
No, we're going to stay with family. We're going to stay right here. I'm just going to take another section of it and say, you know, Victoria's Family, which is our ministry, you can find us at victoriasfamily.org. One of the things we're talking about is we believe in order to turn this tide, we need to bring spiritual disciplines back into the home. We've abdicated that to the church and so many other ministries, which is fine. I'm an elder in the church. I'm all for. We need church. We need healthy church. Would you agree, though, that this movement needs to move back into the home and let it be church supported versus church centered and home? Basically, it doesn't exist in the home today. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you have to understand, I'm really strong on the church.
Mm-hmm.
If any one group of my heroes in life, it's pastors.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how pastors do it. They gotta marry them, bury them, counsel them, preach to them, hold their hand. A pastor has to do it, and they can't do it. The only worse job than being a pastor is being a pastor's wife.
Mm-hmm.
It would be the only harder, not worse job, harder job.
Yeah.
And I remember when Obama went to Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to solve the racial problem because, I mean, just think, Father's Day, 114 were shot and I think it was 17 killed, and one was a small boy and a little girl, and nobody's talking about it. And he went there and came back, and nothing happened. If I would have been Obama's shoes, and I would still like to do this day, I would have gone to Chicago. The first thing I would have done is called all the pastors together. And I would have reamed them out, and then I would have challenged them. I said, if you do not fulfill your mission, it doesn't matter what else we do in a culture and a society. And I would challenge the pastors to build into fathers how to be a dad. Now, if that's what you call spiritual things, then yes, that is. We've got to teach fathers how to relate to their spouse and to their children. And if the church doesn't do that, where are they going to get it? At Planned Parenthood? No, they'll just take you out and kill your baby. And so the first thing I would do is call all the pastors together in any community. Second, I would call all the leaders together. The economic leaders, the political leaders, the social leaders, everything. The educational leaders, I would call them together and lay out the responsibility they have in their discipline to building families and parenting. Because it doesn't matter what you do in education if you don't get fathers relating to their children. People say, well, you know, in the neighborhood with racism and everything, it's we need money because there's such a low income from real estate taxes for schools. So we need more money. But look at Minneapolis. Minneapolis pours more money into inner city schools than any state ever dreamed of. They have poured hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's done nothing. Nothing. Because they never dealt with a father. You look at Baltimore. Oh my gosh. My wife and I drove from the airport in Baltimore. And we drove to Atlanta. I don't know, somewhere we drove. And we went through this neighborhood, blocks after blocks after blocks, like 5-8 miles. It was just, I mean, the windows boarded up, just men, young boys just hanging out in the, it was almost scary. Just, you would go through a intersection, there's just kids hanging out, grown men, everything, just hanging out there. You would look down the alleys. Oh, I never dreamed of this. The trash, the garbage, totally fulfilled the alleys, 5, 6, 7 feet tall. You couldn't even get a car out if you had one. And my heart, I mean, I cried.
Yeah.
And I cannot get it out of my mind. But Baltimore spent $16,000 a student, and in their 13 major schools, not one kid can qualify in math. It's not just money. We've got to put the family back together.
Yeah.
And that has to start with politics, has to start with economics, and it has to start, first of all, with the church.
Yeah.
So I believe the church has a responsibility to fathers.
Oh, that's so good. You know, maybe we can do some travel together and go to Chicago, my hometown, together. And
I'll pray, you pay.
Hey, there you go. I love it. You know, you mentioned the fathers. Obviously, that's on your heart around this core issue of the desecration of the family. What else would you say has caused this this decline in the family in our society?
One is probably progressivism, the liberal message, the liberal democratic message. Now, I'm not getting into politics here. I'm getting into reality. You take the top 20 cities with racism, poverty, and everything. 19 of the 20 entire structures run by Democrats and liberal. Now that says something. You look at the states where the problems are. It's liberal, democratic positions. And if we do not change the liberal message, I don't care what you do, because I believe the liberal message dehumanizes a person. This is why we've had how many trillions of dollars in poverty aid and everything. And it hasn't done hardly anything. Hardly anything, because you can give a man a fish, and you have to do it every day. Teach him how to fish, and he'll feed himself for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And we need the message that man is unique. I mean, men, women, individuals are unique. They're created in the image of God, infinite value, dignity, and worth. And we need to serve people. If we truly love people, to help them stand on their own 2 feet. We need an economic solution. We need an educational solution. We need a spiritual solution. And everybody is just talking now. All of them are talking about the systemic racist police. They're missing the point. See, here's what I fear. A problem well defined is half solved. If you do not define the problem right, you will never solve it. And since 1965 and Martin Luther King Jr., with all the riots of the Rodney King, of the Watts area in Atlanta, everywhere, nobody has analyzed the problem. Nothing has happened. Trillions of dollars put into it. And people are still hurting. They're still poor. They're still racist. And so if you do not analyze the problem wrong, you will not have the right solution. A profound problem needs a profound solution.
Yeah.
A diversified problem needs a diversified solution. Right now, we have diversified problems. But
yeah, Josh, I want to get your thoughts on something. I'm looking at a study that just came out. Man, it looked at the family. It's just not good news. Although I'm an optimist, and so I think, you know, obviously things can be turned around. But you know, one stat that keeps standing out to me was around biblical worldview and biblical literacy. And from 4 or 5 decades ago, that biblical literacy has dropped from 65% in the boomer generation to around 4% estimated in the millennial generation. So in other words, when our society is looking at things out of the lens of a biblical worldview, that has dropped 98% since 4 or 5 decades, since the boomer generation. Well, what would you say about what has caused that trend negative? from 65, and the Gen X, Gen Y dropped to 35%, and then in the millennial generation, it's dropped to 4% of biblical literacy or worldview and how we approach things. Do you think that's had an effect, and what do you think has caused that?
Yes, it's had an effect. Our Christian schools, thank God, more and more of them are starting to teach from a biblical worldview. To me, if a Christian school does not build into a biblical worldview into a child, why in the world don't they close their doors and quit wasting people's money? And that's probably half of Christian schools. But that other half, I told my wife, many of our kids are in good hands. The seminaries are not teaching worldview, so pastors are coming out not knowing. And a worldview, which most people don't even know what it is, the worldview is how you view the world. You can have a scientific worldview. You view everything from a scientific perspective. You can have an economic worldview. You do, like Marxism, view everything from economics. Or you can have a biblical worldview where you view everything from a biblical grid. For example, my responsibility as a father with my 3 daughters and my son was to build into them a biblical worldview.
Yes.
Now, an example of that, every person is created in the image of God, has the stamp of the image of God on their DNA and their life. Even Hitler did, Mussolini did, Mao did, had the stamp of God's image. When God created man, he didn't create them. He created one race with different pigments of skin. He created them all with equal value, everything, capacity, everything. And so I teach my children, somebody said to me, well, why don't you have more racial tendencies? I said, because of my biblical worldview. I said, what do you mean? Well, in my biblical worldview, every single individual is created in the image of God with infinite value, dignity, and worth. Every individual. I have never met in 139 countries. I've spoken to 47 million people, something like that and all. I have never met a person that was not loved by God. Now think of that. I have never met anyone from every race, culture of the world that God does not love. Can I do any less? I have never met anyone in the world that Jesus didn't die for. No one. All my neighbors, the people in China, in Africa, everywhere. Even Hitler. If Hitler had been the only person alive, Jesus still would have died for him. Wow, that's what's humbling to me. If I was the only person alive, it's one thing that brought me to Christ, is when I realized if I was the only person alive, Christ still would have sacrificed himself on the cross. And I have never met a person that is not in the image of God. I've never met a person, now think of this. I have never met a person that God doesn't want a relationship with. How can I treat anyone less than what my Lord treats them? Besides, it's not a matter of treating, because all are created in the image of God. See, that's a worldview. So I view everyone through this biblical grid that all are value, all are equal, and that there's equality and diversity, and that this is how I must treat people then. That's part of your worldview. That's what I train my children. I would take my children in. There's a homosexual, gay section of Laguna Beach. And there's a hotel there that I've stayed in, I bet 50 times, right in the center of the gay community. Dottie and I would stay there with our kids. On the corner was a restaurant. Everyone was transgender or gay, from the cook on down. And all I know, well, I walked out there, a gay cook is the best cook in the world. But I would walk in. People would come over and hug me. They were all gay, transgender, everything. And one day I was there with 3 of my kids. The young baby was with grandma. And they were about 9 to 12, 13 years old. And there was a young man there by the name of Jade who eventually died of AIDS became like a son to me. And I said, Jade, do you have a few minutes? Can you take a break from work? He said, yeah. I pulled up a chair in the end of the table, had him sit down, and I said, now, Jay, I'd like you to share with my children, what is it like being gay in America?
Mm-hmm.
What are your fears? What are the danger things? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not only did my kids get an earful, I did.
Yeah.
It totally changed my perspective. And I believe the more we can build relationships with people, the greater understanding we have.
Yeah, I love that. You know, one of the core principles I learned from my father, especially, was he says everyone has intrinsic value. And you just got to find it. You've got to find, you know, just by loving people, and start out with loving them more than you hate them. And you know, I grew up in the '60s, '70s, and I certainly faced my share of challenges in Chicago. Actually, it's many doesn't
You,
realize.
you, you, you remember the 60s?
Oh yeah.
Terence, if you were there, you don't remember it.
Well, I
You were
remember my
stoned.
portion of it.
You were stoned if you were there in the 60s.
Well, I was young. See, I wasn't doing stuff like that, Josh. I was a young guy now. You know, I was just doing stuff like playing baseball and you know, hanging out and stuff like that in the
Playing with
park. You know?
girls, and yeah, I know, Terence.
Yeah, I'm a young
I
guy,
know.
man. You know, so
Yeah.
I got a few less years. You know, but you know, many don't realize that Chicago, Illinois, was the one place that you know Martin Luther King never completed his march. He was bricked on Cicero Avenue, and they had to drag him off. And he says that's where he gave the speech. He said, "Man, I've been to Alabama, I've been to Arkansas, I've been to Tennessee, but Chicago is a whole other thing."
Deficit.
And you know, one of the things that I think about that you said is just so critical, and it's stuck in my mind. And you know, the plight of the family. I think no nation can rise beyond its spiritual condition, and I
Well, no
think
nation in history has.
yeah. And I think we're challenged with that. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. I mean, I just think we're you know we're kind of bumping our heads up against this wall because our spiritual driver in this country. I'm seeing the latest report I'm seeing it's just a continuous decline, and I'm just trying to figure out is what's going on, and the family is just being impacted in a way I've never seen it before in so many areas. I'd love to get your perspective on those couple of things, or you know, any
Well,
other thoughts that you have as to
yeah.
the family
Well,
desecration.
so many that I know families are strong, Terence. They really are. Now, maybe it's the circles I run in,
Mm.
but of course, I'm speaking on the family all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, I speak on relationships that transforms, starting with the family. But it's probably ultimately a problem of the church not fulfilling our mission in the family. And if the church is called to preach the gospel, to discipleship, to mentor, to fulfill the Great Commission. Well, I believe part of discipleship goes beyond just, quote, spiritual things. I believe discipleship goes into economics. I believe discipleship goes into racism. I believe discipleship goes into politics. Not choosing Democrat, Republican, Independent, or a Texan, but evaluating values and principles of the various parties. I vote principles, values in people. And there's one party that seems to have more than the other, but sometimes it's lacking. I find it in the other party, so I vote the other way. But I would say if we could get seminaries to start really working on the relationships of their pastors as husbands and fathers in seminary. Most of them are.
Yeah.
And more they're getting older. and teaching the value of the family and the biblical concept of the family. And then getting down to brass tacks. You've got to teach how can I be a good father?
Yeah. Yeah.
How can I build a relationship with my wife?
Mm-hmm.
How can I build a relationship with my neighbor? How can I build a relationship with the man who's mowing my lawn? Or with the owner of the lawn I'm mowing. I've sure done that enough in my lifetime.
Yeah.
But we've got to teach the how-tos of family and fathering. And there's few people out there doing it. But most of those that are doing it are good. They really are. I thank God for promise keepers. And I hear they're on a comeback. I don't think they'll make it. But I remember I was in Washington, D.C. with a big Promise Keeper rally.
Yeah.
And I was with, the African-American fellow that was way up in top, a neat guy. I can't think of his name. And he was one of the leaders. We were sitting there. He said, "Isn't this exciting?" I said, "No." I said, "It's a tragedy." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's like almost all your Promise Keepers events. You challenge men to be fathers. You challenge them to be good husbands. You challenge them to go home and tell your wife, I'm going to be different and everything. But not one speaker here has talked about how you can be different." I said, "You're sending people home that are going to ask their wife for forgiveness and then turn around and do the same thing over again and end a divorce." And the downside to me of Promise Keepers, but I loved Promise Keepers. The best, it was in Cleveland, I think, was the best situation with men I ever had. And I talked on 7 ways to build relationships. 7 ways to build relationships, starting with your children, with your neighbors and all. And so with Promise Keepers, they did a great job of motivating. But they didn't seem to do a great job of training on how to be a better husband.
I love for you to share with us, Josh, very quickly as we begin to wrap up. Those 7 ways. Share them with us right now, if you can. The top 3. Well,
you can go to my website, josh.org/7 A's of parenting, and download the entire transcripts, everything.
Absolutely. Free. Give us that website one more time.
Josh.org. That's easy enough. I can even remember that. Josh.org/parenting, or 7 principles of parenting, or 7 A's. They all start with A's.
Okay.
Like 1 is availability. When we are available to our child, to anyone, it says one thing: I am important. Kids spell love Time, time. And we need to learn to be available to our children, to our spouse, to others. Another is affection. When we express affection, it says to somebody, I am lovable. And when somebody really feels you love them, that's the beginning of a relationship. And we need to express that verbally. For example, with my children, I had 4 children I have, and I wanted every one of them every day to hear me 10 times, I love you, or something like that. Now, most of the time I didn't do it 10 times with each, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times. I've even gotten up at night and gone into one of my daughter's rooms or sons, kissed them on the forehead, because I forgot to tell them I loved them.
Wow.
And I love you. And my kids always knew I was there the next day. Thanks, Dad, you woke me up. But we need to express it verbally.
Yeah.
I love you, I love you, I love you. Second, we need to express it with appropriate physical expression, with a kiss in the cheek, a hug, an arm around the shoulder, holding the hand. I was going to the Lakers game with Kelly and Sean, my oldest daughter, and my son is the second oldest child. And we had a pizza there, and then we walked across a huge parking lot at the Staples Center. And all of a sudden, didn't realize we're walking across. Sean is holding one of my hands, my daughter's holding my, and we're walking across holding hands. And I said to myself, "This is family. This is family." And so we need to teach people.
I love that. I love that. So I want to encourage everyone to go to the website and get the remaining A's.
Josh.org.
Josh.org. And, this has been a highlight for my week, Josh. I've been waiting to talk to you and catch up.
Man, I bet this makes your year.
This makes the entire year. This is 2020 right here with Josh McDowell. We just need to have an ongoing thing. Any books, anything before we leave, anything you're working on right now that we need to know about or get excited about?
Finishing up a book on wholeness.
Oh, wow.
It's mainly dealing with pornography, but you wouldn't know it.
Okay.
The wholeness of one's life, and working on several others, and it'll be the last books I'll ever do.
Okay.
I've got 152 books out and 2 or 3
I think you need to write a few more books here. You've been
no, man. I got other things I want to do with my life now. Trust me.
Yeah. Let me ask you this last question. I'd love to get your thoughts on this last question. How would you? I know you don't want to think about this, but at the end of the day, as a loving father, husband, and so forth, and we could only say one thing about you, what would you want that to be? What would you want that one thing?
What I'd to be on my gravestone. He loved God, he loved his wife, and he spent time with his children.
Yeah,
that's it. He loved God.
Yeah,
he loved his wife, and he spent time with his children.